All right, in a world where screens have become our constant companions, how do we ensure they're not just tools for learning, but also guardians of student well being? That's the challenge of ed tech that they're going to face today. Joining us in our upcoming panel, we'll navigate with our digital frontier, exploring how technology can promote healthy online habits and protect students from the pitfalls of cyberspace. We've gathered experts ready to share insights and strategies for creating a safer, more supportive digital environment for all learners. Can we have our session's moderator, Dr. Ruth A. Best, the Assistant Dean at Touro University, and our panelists on stage to discuss the topic, Building a Healthy Digital Environment, EdTech's Responsibility to Student Well-Being. Welcome them.
Thank you. Good morning. I would be remiss if I do not first acknowledge the custodians of the lands upon which we stand and honor their ancestors past and present. Welcome to our panel discussion entitled Building a Healthy Digital Environment, EdTech's Responsibility in Student Well-Being. In line with the African custom, I greet you. And how are the children? We hope the response would be the children are well. I'm Dr. Ruth Best, a native of the gem of the Caribbean Sea, Barbados. Who can tell me which notable singer is from Barbados? Riri, yes, Rihanna. And she is the Right Honorable Robin Rihanna Fenty. She is our national hero. My career trajectory spans business and education. And with me today are 5 other leaders who are going to join me in trying to determine how we can best utilize educational technology while ensuring our students' well-being. We have with us Tavon, Chris, Deb, Janine, and Anna, and they're going to tell you a little bit about themselves. Starting with Anna.
Hi, good morning. How are you today? I hope you are all okay. Do you want to stretch a little? Have you been? So maybe we can stand up and stretch a little, please. Okay, so yes. So I know it will be another 30 minutes to do this, so to listen. Thank you so much. Thank you. So I'm Anna, and I believe the education is very powerful in transforming lives of others. I've been an educator for more than 20 years. I've been in Philippines. I started my career there. I went to Dubai to teach, and now I am in Canada. We have our school there that we believe that through education we will be transforming lives. So thank you.
Thank you, Anna. Good morning, everyone. I'm Janine Shepard. I'm the founder, board co-chair, and president of Youth for Excellence Limited. We are a nonprofit organization that's based in 7 Caribbean territories in the US. And short story, less than 41 characters, what we do. We provide wraparound support for children in education. What does that mean? We give them access to healthcare, nutrition, educational content, and resources, because oftentimes the root cause of poor educational performance is actually poverty in developing nations. So that's what we focus on. We've assisted over 12,000 children to date and have been recognized by various Caribbean governments, and obviously we're here today. So I'm very grateful for the opportunity to speak with you guys today, and I hope that we'll have a productive conversation. Thank you.
Thanks, Janine. Hi, my name is Deb. I'm a PhD candidate from Eastern University. I'm very pleased to be here with all of the notable scholars on the stage. I am studying online community among online learners. So building social learning experiences into formal course curriculums and beyond is what I'm studying.
Hello, my name is Dr. Christopher Bond. Currently, I'm an international keynote speaker in the areas of assistive technologies and artificial intelligence. I'm also an advisor to several medtech, edtech, military, AI firms that are looking at ways and solutions to take their technology and incorporate it into public education.
Thank you. Hi, good morning. My name's Tevon Asaturi. I grew up in obscurity, spent over 20 years in finance due to that reason. And spending that long in finance, I realized education and finance is a huge problem. So for the last 3 years, I've been developing an edutech company that educates individuals nationally in the realm of personal finance.
Okay, great. So let's get started with our questions. We're going to be posing some questions that each of our panelists will try to address. So, and I'm going to start with Anna, that first question. So when you think about educational technology and student well-being, what comes to mind?
So right now in Aquinas College, we're doing online classes. It's asynchronous. So when you talk about education, technology, and well-being, it is very important because right now it is a well-known that we are moving to a new pace of education, and we are really very much involved in technology. Technology for us is actually a good one, but also I know that there are some challenges. So for us in adult learner, we reach a lot of students through technology because we're offering asynchronous online classes. When you talk about well-being, for us, of course, we talk about physical and mental health. And of course, as a college, we talk about that are they ready to be really a career, to their new career. And we have to prepare them also. So are they mentally and emotionally and skillfully well to prepare for the job. So that is well-being for us.
Thank you. And Chris, you mentioned assistive technology. And, I'm a special educator, and this is dear and near to my heart. So, in thinking of this same question, what does student well being and technology mean to you?
Well, one of the big trends we're seeing right now nationally, and if you've watched the news just in the last couple of days, people are using technology now to do and victimize people. And our students are right at the brink of dealing with that. If you've watched what's going on in California just the last couple of weeks, students have been using artificial intelligence to manipulate photos and pornography and stuff to incriminate, to humiliate, to violate. And yet we don't have any policies, procedures, or protocols to protect people when those types of events happen. And what's even more problematic for me and what I'm doing a lot of work on right now is that our general population and public doesn't fact check. So when a sound clip comes out of a political person or a school principal or a police officer saying something that's absurd and obnoxious, nobody's thinking that it could have been created by artificial intelligence. And there's people now spending time in jail. There's students that are being victimized right now. There's teachers that are being harassed and victimized right now because artificial intelligence can do some things that humans can't do, and people aren't taking the time to fact check.
Okay. In terms of the same question, Deb, what would you say from your perspective?
So, in the world of online higher ed, sense of well-being comes with sense of belonging, affinity to institution. Um, those are those are the aspects that you'd be looking at for student well-being. Where technology comes in is for the online learner. Learning can be isolating, and so one of the goals of teaching online is to develop social learning experiences.
Thank you. Janine and Devon, anything to add?
Yeah, I think the panelists so far have been, very comprehensive in what they mentioned. But I think for my perspective, I like to ground it from more of a small island developing nation standpoint. So when you look at Jamaica, right, during the pandemic and COVID was basically ravaging everywhere, everyone was indoors trying to learn from home. While you guys were utilizing technology in education, we were just beginning the process of actual online learning because we didn't really have the infrastructure. So it was actually during the pandemic that you saw a lot of edtech companies like EduFocal, one-on-one learning, Learning Hub.online, all these brands kind of emerged. And so it wasn't really like you were using VR in the classroom or that what you see in like other developed nations. It was just like you had these course materials online. So we're still playing catch up with a lot of it. And when you look at student well-being, you first have to consider, well, what do you even mean by well-being, right? You have cognitive well-being, which means you're looking at how their brain performance affects them academically. You have psychological, feelings and emotions. You have mental, physical, social. So these are all things that you need to consider. And when you look at the fact that we are heavily under-resourced, it's going to take some time before we're able to get to a place where we're even able to put in stuff like, telehealth for kids and counseling, because mental health is still such a taboo for Caribbean nations. But our kids are suffering because of it. And our Minister of Health in Jamaica and several other Caribbean nations, they have really been pushing for more of these things. But again, it's not a case where we haven't identified the issues. It's just that we're not in a position to create that kind of change as of yet. So these are things that I would like for us to look at. But again, very productive conversation thus far.
Anything else to add?
Thank you. Actually, I don't know if you all realize this, but just as my team here was speaking, I realized although we're all talking about education and the impact and on the students from the education perspective, we all see it through a different lens. To bring it back to Chris's point, and you were kind of talking about governance on AI and technology, in addition to having synonymity across the board, so people aren't getting different bits of information here versus there. That's one of the biggest, or couple of biggest points that we worked on while building our product was how do we make sure the security of the students, down to not releasing student identification, teacher identification, even school system identification, but at the same time, to Chris's point, governing the capability of the AI and technology so that the students don't have the capabilities that Chris was mentioning, where you're seeing recently pop up in the news, right?
Yeah. So in continuing this conversation, and you guys have actually started going into our second question, but in this age of gamification, robotics, social media, AI, cybersecurity, online teaching, video conferencing, learning management systems, and all these types of technologies, why is this topic so important in education today? And Tevon, I'm going to start with you.
All right, excellent. I mean, you can't deny the fact that everything is leaning a lot more quickly into technology, right? It's not just the education industry, it's all industries. And aside from that, I think technology is very important because we're starting to see education get decentralized. And I think in the next decade or so, we're going to see a lot more of that as people start to transition into online platforms. So, why is EdTech or technology important in the field of education? Well, because within 10 years, most of the experience for the students is going to be online. As a sample, I'll tell you, e-learning alone is projected to be $1 trillion industry by 2030, and that speaks a lot. I mean, this is just education online, right? So to get there, we need to implement the right technology and, of course, governance for the technology.
And speaking of online, Deb, how would you respond in terms of the importance of this topic?
I think he's done a great job bringing it up. Um, Online learning is outpacing traditional enrollments right now, and it's projected to continue. And really, technology is ubiquitous across the college classrooms. Even when it's a blended learning scenario where you have face-to-face time, technology is still a huge aspect of learning.
Anything else to add?
Yes, it is, as I mentioned a while ago, technology right now, as said already, that it is already, this is the trend now. And we are not going back. Even though I'm a traditional learner, I've been in education for more than 20 years. I'm a PhD in psychology, but this one, the technology is now ahead of us. If we are not taking it seriously, then we're missing the point. But the thing is, now what we have all those adult learners or students who are doing online, we have to make sure also that we are giving the right skills, the right education, and we're keeping their well-being. And this is important topic because right now this is the trend, and unless little researchers are already started on this. They started maybe in 2015, but a lot of researchers need to be conducted on this topic.
I'll add to that a little. So, as my colleagues have all said, this is obviously the trend. But again, looking at it from my perspective, several things need to happen before we can even begin to think about, okay, how do we actually hop onto this trend, right? So we definitely need to look at increasing digital penetration. How does that come through? Various telecoms companies are now trying to put up more towers around because you go to certain parts of the Caribbean, there's no signal there. And what that meant is that during the pandemic, there was a huge digital divide because in Jamaica alone, over 500,000 students, bear in mind the entire island's population is 2.9 million. So 500,000 students didn't have any tablet devices during the pandemic. And we led drives in the Ministry of Education to provide hundreds of tablets to students who were in need. But again, that's just like chipping away at the block very smallly, right? So in terms of moving towards these trends and getting to a place of readiness, you see where I'm going with this.
Yes, lots needs to be done.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm coming to you, Chris, in a minute. But just to piggyback, right here in the U.S., I am in New York, in the South Bronx. You talked about developing versus,
Developed. There's still I guess there's still pockets in developed nations
yeah.
that, still struggle.
We had a lot of students who did not have access to the technology, and they didn't have access to classrooms. And I know Chris can also speak to that as a former superintendent. Yes.
I think I need to state the facts here because whether we want to immerse into these technologies or not, we have no choice. Currently, right now in the United States, the Department of Labor, 405,000 teacher vacancies. That number is going to double in the next 5 years.
Yes.
All the universities combined in the United States are only going to put out 100,000 teachers, and only half of them will go into the profession. Even with the visa process, J1 visas, there's only 5,000 J1 visas in the whole United States. We don't have enough educators in our system to educate our students. So we're going to be forced to immerse into technologies, whether we have, and this is where we have a problem with poverty, because if you live in communities with poverty, those students will not have access to the technologies that the kids who don't live in poverty have access to. The other thing I wanted to mention is that 40% of all teachers in the United States right now are not even certified or qualified to be in the classroom. We have English teachers teaching math. We have science teachers teaching PE because we don't have enough teachers. And so one of the things that we're seeing is right now I work with a school out of Texas that has no teachers. They just have volunteer parents. They're doing assistive technology curriculum and they're outperforming other schools in Texas 4-1. So our profession has to look at things differently because most of us are traditionalists and we feel like we're not valued anymore because technology can do a lot of things that we cannot do. But we're immersing into it, and it's going to happen in the next 2 years, not 5 or 10.
Yeah, thank you very much for stating that, Chris, because it also, as a higher ed faculty, it also begs the question, how are we preparing the teachers to be immersed, as you said, in this technology? In the essence of time, moving right ahead, the literature. What is in the literature? We started to touch on that when Janine talked about the different types of well-being. But I know Deb, you've been doing some digging, and we found a lot of literature coming out of Great Britain. But what else did you find in your research?
So, here in the United States, we talk less about well being and more about mental health when you search the literature. And I hope you won't mind while I read. I promise it's brief. But again, looking at higher education specifically, the prevalence and complexity of mental health disorders among college students has increased over time, and few college students seek support. So, according to the most recent American College Health Assessment, nearly 50% of college students experience moderate or serious psychological distress. And what makes the problem even worse is most college faculty and staff receive little formal preparation related to addressing what are referred to as non-academic barriers to college student success.
Wow. Any other findings in the literature? Anything you've seen? What about K to 12, Chris? Anything?
And I think everybody in the room can comply with this, but if you look at some of the emerging research that's coming out of social media and artificial intelligence, we talked a little bit about one, people are not fact checking anymore. They believe the sound blurbs, they believe the manipulation. But what's even more pressing, and we just saw a presentation that I thought was phenomenal about elevators pitches, and I've worked with marketing companies that talks about 30-second, 90-second elevator pitch, but we know now that the human brain is starting to evolve. Look at the research out of Baylor that's talking that the attention span of a student is 7 seconds. When I was a school superintendent, we used to talk the 10-12 rule. And when I was a student, it was 20 minutes. You could keep a student engaged for 20 minutes. Then it sort of digressed to 10-12 minutes. Now we're talking about 7 seconds. And what are going to be the implications of keeping people focused and engaged and on task in those types of environments? And so this is some of the newer research that's coming out. You can look at the work coming out of Johns Hopkins and also Baylor on that.
Thank you. So, moving right along, Tavon, we started to touch on the cons of EdTech and the responsibility when thinking about students' well-being. But what are some of the pros?
The pros of EdTech
Yes.
from the student's perspective.
Yes.
I mean, we could take it right back to the engagement of the students, right, and how the statistics on that are quickly shifting towards shorter attention span for the students, and everything's online, and students want to touch and feel things through a screen now, and also be able to be engaged, which is not easy to do. It's very hard to keep a student engaged, especially across most topics, and especially if now there's no more teacher in front of them trying to be like, hey, wake up, or XYZ. So I think um, understanding how to keep the students engaged, putting things into bite-sized pieces. For example, the platform we built out, we spent a lot of time thinking about, well, okay, we can put out hundreds of hours of multimedia content out here for the students, but are they actually going to sit and listen to this? We're talking about numbers, and talking about numbers can get boring very fast. So some of our videos are like 30 seconds long. Some of the assignments are like 2 minutes long, and then they get to engage with each other. So I think thinking through how to maintain the focus of the students is really important as we transition into this new environment.
Anything else to add, Anna, Janine, Deb?
So, as it relates to the pros of EdTech and student well-being, just to ground it back, um, during the pandemic, when I was at Amherst College, like finishing up my degree, neuroscience and econ, one thing that I really appreciated was actually the introduction of more online learning. So yes, it has its like negative effects for some student learners, but for me, it has been an immense positive. I tend to learn best at my own pace. I prefer an asynchronous learning style. And I felt like prior to this, not only did it restrict access to students who couldn't have made it in there, but for persons who just feel more comfortable learning in their own spaces. So it can be isolating for some, but I also think that it does have a lot of benefits. At least I've seen it in my own personal experience, and a lot of my colleagues have seen it too. And I think we need to definitely integrate a social aspect, just like what my peer down there just said. But I think it's often the positives of it are heavily overlooked because there are a lot of different learning styles out there, and for me, it has been a huge win.
If I could just chime for 3 second add on here, I think one of the biggest benefits is also, and bringing it back, synonymity across the information. Because as you said, 40% of the teachers aren't even qualified to be teaching what they're teaching. And I know that firsthand. I'm sure we all know that firsthand. We got English teachers teaching science and just trying to make it work. But with technology and the capability of scaling, the students can get good information from one source, and just you can scale that.
So for me, I would like to talk about the pros and the cons. So it's not always cons, and some of, as we see on our social media or on internet, there's always an attack on the new technology that the people are using, and somehow we can say it is really good. Some people can help them. They help them to write. There's always a positive on that. From the previous panel last few days, they mentioned about individual learning, and that is good. Some people, I think he's here talking about, we let our children learn how they learn, and we can do that. Some people are really for online learning. They would like their personal space. Some people might be, maybe for traditional, maybe it will be very hard, very difficult. But the technology, as Chris mentioned, we cannot avoid it. It's there. So we have to learn as educator to adapt on this one. The consequence maybe, and this is based on many researches, they talk about the well-being, the mental health, of course, feeling of isolation, but they might be depressed, no one to talk to. Some people, for adult learners, this is very good. This gives them open their opportunity to study while they are, again, still be responsible in their family for their financials, work. And this is very good for us in the college. It broaden our horizon also. But of course, the consequence, of course, is we have as an educator also, we can never live, even though technology is here, we are still valuable. We are valuable educators. We still need teachers, even it is in technology, right? It cannot be always AI. The human aspect of being educator still needed in technology. So that's what my pros and cons in technology.
Okay, Deb, and then we're going to move on.
So I looked at technology in this area more as there's an immense amount of resources online. And a lot of the universities, at least in the US, are piloting programs like telehealth services, online mental health screenings, uh, and online training for staff and faculty is a big one too. So that's how I looked at it.
All right. So, our last question. Time goes by quickly, folks, when you're having fun. How can we create safe spaces? And Janine, I'm going to have you lead this one online that will nurture student well-being. And we recognize that we are representative of the globe here. So, yes, how can we create safe spaces?
I think the creation of safe spaces would definitely have to be a collaboration between both the public and private sectors. So these private companies are oftentimes developing these ed tech, but I know for Jamaica it's called the Ministry of Education. I think here it's called the Department of Education. Probably have some child protection services, right? So definitely collaboration with those entities on creating the necessary frameworks to actually monitor and evaluate these platforms and ensure that children are being kept safe. I think this collaboration should also extend to their caregivers, whether parents, guardians, etc. They should receive these training in terms of how these platforms work. They should be paying attention to what their children are doing because it is not a teacher's job to raise a child, right? I personally believe that parents should be taking responsibility for their kids. It starts at home. So I think that yes, educators have a certain role to play, but at the end of the day, it comes back to what goes on inside the home. So you need to be paying attention to what your kids are doing on these platforms. And the parents need to be involved in these conversations with other stakeholders to ensure that these platforms are being run responsibly, that their children's data is being handled responsibly.
Deb.
So building safe online spaces is about addressing a set of norms, norms that include writing in full sentences, confidentiality, things that build trust.
Okay, Chris.
For me, and the thing that I'm working on most right now is that we need to regulate and have policies to set forth, and not so many policies about plagiarism and the use of the technology, but if somebody victimizes another human being, incriminates that human being, humiliates that human being, there needs to be consequences, and it needs to be swift and harsh, because we're seeing a huge conglomerate of cyber criminals and even just people that are playing around that are getting involved, and we call it bullying. It's not bullying when you put somebody in prison and they lose their career over it. And we need to start making our students aware of that, and we have to start at the grassroots in our schools. But we really need to start pushing for a call to action with our legislators and our government to regulate those kinds of behaviors.
Yvonne?
I think the answer to this question is yet to be determined, right? Because we're so at the forefront of this ed tech and education through technology and expanding that out. But I would say governance of the technology is extremely important, whether there's AI or not AI. I would say content moderation of the technology that the schools or education systems do end up licensing or purchasing, that content has to be moderated in one form or another. and then the security of the information of the educational institution, the teacher, the student, their personal information, right? Because if something like that can get, if it's not bulletproof, somebody can go in there and just like you hear Target had 4 million debit cards stolen, like the last thing you want is student identities being stolen. So governance, security, and content moderation is what I would say for now.
So I believe that we can build a safe place for e-learning or edtech. It's not only about the governance. It's not only as a parents, as educator. We should always also look into what the educators can do, what the teachers can do. For us, when we're offering online classes, we make it feel it's safe when we have the policies and procedures in the classroom that they have to know. They have a classroom. We're doing a synchronous classes. So they have to know we have the policies and procedures on how you're going to submit your assignments and your requirement and how to use your group chats or your stream when they're doing their messages. And of course, you always have to instill the values. When we don't want that we do the ed tech and they just learn on their own, we have to teach them the values of education still, and we have to teach them on respect. We have to teach them the resiliency also. That will make them feel safe that using this is that they are not only using it for just using it because the technology will make it easy for me, but you have to take on what is the implication of this, what so it makes it easier for you, but then what is the value for you?
Before we open it up for questions, I just wanted to leave you with one quote that encapsulates a lot of what we've heard here today. And it comes from a blog entitled Leveraging Technology to Support Student Well-Being. And it says, digital technology alone is not and will not transform education. It requires people thoughtfully using digital technology as an effective tool to foster a culture of learning and well-being for students and teachers. I want you to give a special thanks to our panel, and then we'll open for questions. So what questions do you have? Go ahead.
Okay, so thank you for that question. That's a very good question. Actually, as I keep on mentioning a while ago, EdTech is our wonder somehow. It helps us and to make our job easy for our students to make it easy. But the influence of the educator in the classroom online will help them also to be more resilient, right? And the online classes, it is very important that you have more also an interaction. So it's either it is a group chat, it's either like an experience, like it could be a blended learning. It was a discussion last time. In our college, we try our best to have more on the interactions, like those workshops about personality development, mental health awareness. We try to make it sure that people are attending in person. So EdTech is there. There are a lot of mental health awareness tools online, and it's for free. You will see that it is for free, but it's also very important that we encourage still the human interaction. So resilience is very important. It's easy to say, but it's hard to build. So how to build that? It is not like we are coaching one time. It is through experience. It could be based on your coursework, and the grit of they are doing. They made a mistake and there's someone who will be able to say, like, you can go on, you can do that. That is the something that we should not miss in EdTech, that mental health, resiliency, values should be still there.
And Chris?
I know nobody wants to hear this response from me, but society is going to change. It's changing right now. If you've been in, I just got back from a forum working with workforce industries and some big companies that were there, like Microsoft and Cisco and Walmart and those places. A lot of people think that Walmart's putting in automation because um, it's cheaper. It's actually not cheaper. It's way more expensive, but they can't find quality employees. People don't show up on time. People don't want to come to work. People don't know how to address their customers. I was in Denny's yesterday, and the robot brought me my Grand Slam. Okay, why? Because they can't find people that can work with human beings, and this is sort of the flip. And I sort of like to say this: technology is changing everything very rapidly, but we also need to understand that it's also changing us as human beings. And so we need to be aware of that. We need to create scenarios so we can teach our students how to cope, how to get along, how to deal with some stress factors. And it does take a human being to do that. And we need to stop running off our educators, and we need to start making their job more professionalized.
In the last 2 minutes.
I was basically about to agree with both of my
Okay,
colleagues on
I'll
this
agree with
panel.
them.
So essentially, what I was addressing to that coach in the audience, you can't really replace that human interaction. That has been a theme that has come up throughout this entire thing. You still need that face-to-face contact. What you get through these, ed tech platforms or social media, etc., is a lot of parasocial relationships. You don't really form that connection with persons, and that has to be fostered. Otherwise, you get a bunch of kids that are socially awkward, right? And we've been seeing a rise in that, especially post-pandemic. So again, agreeing with him here, agreeing with her here, you can't really take that away. So
And in the essence of time, we've got 1 minute. I'm very time conscious. For those of you who know me, I just want to hear from Deb and Tavon. Go
It's
ahead.
it's been asked and answered.
Go ahead. Okay. I wish we had time for more questions, but our time is up. And before my friend over here gives me this, we're wrapping it up. So thank you very much.
Thank you, panelists, for the excellent panel.